Dark ambient music is the soundtrack to millions of videos online at the minute, and it's been pioneered recently by artists like Oneheart, Antent and daniel.mp3. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down a track from scratch, going over the essential VSTs, the sound design tips, and some of the composition tips to get the dark ambient sound perfected. And this is the track that I'm going to make. So every sound in this demo was created using Vital, which is a free synth plugin. It works in every DAW. It's completely free to download. Would highly recommend checking it out if you haven't already. And on top of that, I've also created a pack to go along with this video that has all of the essential sounds you need to create dark ambient music, with atmospheres, 36 Vital presets, and a couple of vocals and original sounds in there as well to use in your own music. So I'll quickly talk about the pack, and then I'll talk about the VSTs that I use in this style of music, and then I'll break down each section of the track. So here is the pack. So I'll be going over the fundamental sound design behind this pack as I break down the song later in the video. But if you want a set of pre-designed presets perfect for this genre, then this is the pack to check out. So they're all in Vital. There's a total of 36 presets and there's some extras as well. So I've got some ambience in there, just some stuff that can add a little bit of texture to your dark ambient tracks, with some eerie sounds and different textures in here that are just great for dark ambient stuff. I've got all of the sound sources, so some of the stuff I record, I sampled a duduk, I sampled some of my analog synths to create the textures in some of these presets. So they're all available to do with as you wish as well. And there's a couple of different vocals in here, which I used in the demo track, just so you've got access to them as well, all royalty free. And then of course we get to the pack. So these are the presets. So I won't go through all of them, just to give you a taste. There's a variety of different pads. Stormy pads, different swells, of course different plucks, and there's a variety of different organic sounds that blend with a lot of these different plucks, and you'll hear them all in action in the track as well. So there's so many different sounds in this pack. And I've tried to really capture all of the main sort of sounds of the genre. What else have we got down here? So there's some Vox pads. Some super moody sounds. And a lot of these pads have got inbuilt textures. So they add variation to your track as well, which is ideal for this genre. A few more plucks. What else? We've got VHS lead. So yeah, I'll show you sort of the fundamentals behind creating these sounds in this video as well. But if you're interested, that's the pack, and I'll drop it in the link in the description down below. But anyway, onto the main VSTs that I use. So as I break down this project, there's a couple of sounds that I'm going to use quite regularly, and I'm just going to demo them quickly now, so you've got a background. So this is just one of the plucks from the pack. I'm just going to turn off distortion altogether. Okay, so one that I've been using a lot recently, which you'll have seen in my recent videos, is a plugin called the Archetype Mateus Salto, which is actually a guitar amp emulation plugin. I'll drop a link to it up here if you want to check out the full video. But for this genre, there's a few things that are really great in it. So firstly, if you want some really heavy amp simulation, then you can run your presets through the amp sim. But I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to keep the cab simulation on. So I've used this on almost all of the tracks. Essentially, it just emulates if you were to play the synth through a cab and get a bit of a sort of roominess to it. You can change the mics as well for different taste. So I'm going to do that. And you can pan one right and one left. So this just gives it sort of more organic feel. And then you've got a little EQ there if you want to use it, which I haven't really used. And the reverb's great. So I use this a lot. Just cut the lows. And particularly love the echo delay available in this. So you can activate all the heads or activate one or two. You can add a bit of tape drive, adjust the mix to taste. I'm going to drop the bass a bit of tape modulation, loads of width. So you can hear it's giving it a really nice crunchy sort of tape echo. And I've used this on a lot of the tracks, which you'll see in a second. I've also used a lot of convolution reverb. So convolution reverb is emulating real spaces, and there's something about the dark ambient sound where you really want to try and capture some element of realism. Even though we're using fully electronic sounds, you want to get some of the tape, some of the analog, and some of the real effects and sounds. So I've used a lot of convolution reverb. So there's one I've loved recently, I've just found after finishing this track, which is called East-West Spaces, where you can actually go in and pick different places, tons of them. So like the catacombs, rock rooms, etc. So you can throw on a nice convolution reverb and see how it sounds. And the one that I use a lot as well is the convolution reverb that's, I think, with Ableton Suite. Again, it's got a really nice sound. Adjust the dry wet to taste, EQ some of the lows to stop it being muddy. And finally, the plugin that I use a lot in this style of music is the Sound Toys stuff, in particular the Echo Boy, alongside the Archetype delay. It's a sort of similar tape delay. You can go for a sort of lo-fi effect if you go for a cheap tape. And then you've got a lot more control over the actual sort of groove and swing of the delay in this. Let's give it a dual echo. But for now, I'm going to dive in and break down the full track. So this is the project file. You can see I've categorized it into a few different sections, so be sure to stick around for each because there's some tips and tricks in each that really take your tracks to the next level. I'm going to be going over the sound design, some of the theory behind them, and just general tips and practices to get the most authentic dark ambient sound. Starting off with the most simple, which is of course ambience. You can use whatever you want: tape, vinyl hiss, field recordings, whatever you've got. I've used two from the pack, Owl on Vinyl and Distant Jungle. I've slowed both of them down so they're getting a bit of pitch shifting, they're getting a bit of slowness, just to give it a more eerie sort of otherworldly feel. And I've also sent it to a send, which is taking some of the higher frequencies, everything above around 1 kilohertz, going through Portal, going through a reverb at 100% wet, and giving it an almost sort of dystopian, eerie feel with some of the bird sounds and textures. And these just blend nicely into the track as we progress through. Just make sure it's not too overpowering or not too lost in the mix. So that's the ambience. Next up, we've got plucks. So for the plucks, I'll just give you a quick overview of how they're made. So generally, you want to get something like a nice, simple sine wave. We'll go for basic shapes, sine wave here. Give it a nice pluck sound. So we'll do this, get that nice pluck profile, give it a little bit of release, and then you can adjust the attack so it's not too harsh on the pluck. Then you're going to want to filter the frequencies that you want. So I'll throw on filter 1. I'm going to go for a notched spread, just to flatten it out and go a little bit lower here. So we're not getting too much of the high frequencies. We also want to filter out the lows in a minute. And then you can also get a white noise effect on there. So this is what it sounds like so far. So we'll get a bit of white noise in there as well. Make sure it's quite quiet, and you can use the envelope 1 on the level there just to give a nice plucky white noise sound. And we're going to send that to filter. We'll send it to filter 1, in fact. So it's filtered the same as this. Again, you can hear it sort of beefens up the sound a little bit. Next up, get some effects on there. So distortion is of course ever present in this genre, and a load of reverb. So with each of the presets that I made as well, by the way, if you go into effects here from the voice, you can turn off whichever you don't want. I've used macros as well, so you can often just slide the macro down for stuff like reverb, or if you want to turn off distortion to use your own distortion plugin, you can do that here. But everything does have inbuilt effects on each preset, so they all sound great as is. But if you want to use your own effects, you've got the option to as well. So we'll give it a little bit more of a higher mix, higher decay, cut some of the lows, give it a little bit more chorus, a little bit more drive, drop the mix a bit, and I'll filter a post just to get rid of anything too high. So it's super bassy. I've got drop an EQ on there and just cut the lows completely. So that's the basic sound, and then again, of course, you can reduce the attack if you want to be more plucky. You can add additional oscillators to give it a beefier sound. If you want to make the sound more complicated, you can throw things like randomizers on to the wave profile as well, just to give it variance as you go through the plucks. So with that in mind, this is my pluck bus. So we're starting off with the sort of core of the track, which is the chord progression pluck. So this is using dark pluck 1. You can see there sine wave with this waves razor that comes in a little bit. And we've got radio on there from Sound Toys, which is great for some distortion. EQ, just to cut out some of the resonant frequencies that I don't want. And then the archetype choreo one that I mentioned before to give some of that echo, that tapey echo. So the track is in F minor, it's 62 BPM, and I'm playing a sort of 1-7-6-5 chord progression. So I'm playing it as a sort of arpeggiated, simple triad. You can see here, these are the notes. I like to keep it super simple initially. You can add stuff like sevenths, ninths, etc. as you layer in more textures. And there's a lot of different textures in these sort of tracks, even though I'm playing quite a simple progression. And I'm trying to keep the track fairly simple to make it more interesting with playing lots of different patches and lots of different presets. And just getting the sounds layering together to be more interesting. So on top of that, you've got this top melody, which I came up with. This is the smoky lead. I've got a bit of particle reverb as well as some EQing and the archetype Cory Wong. Particle verb is a great Max for Live reverb. It's just a sort of reverb with delay particles in there as well. And then we're just beefing it up again with more notes. This is a delayed notes. I'm using Echo Boy from Sound Toys for that analog delay, spaced out from Baby Audio for the reverb, and stacking the reverb again with the particle reverb. So this is the Dark Plucks 2. And again, I'm just layering some notes from the chords as well as some 7th and 9th notes as well to make it more interesting. So again, a little bit more of an interesting profile. So I've got 2 more presets, analog pluck and the analog pluck 2. And then finally all together, this is what it sounds like. So I'm adding an additional layer pluck here, which has got some auto pan, so it's moving left to right really quickly, as well as these effects and the ARP section. So this is playing arpeggiator going into vital, playing dark pluck 1, and playing the VHS lead. So that's the plucks. Onto the pads. Again, I'll just show you some quickly sound design basics for the pads. So we get vital open again. So the way I'm making the pads are, firstly, we'll have a nice warm sort of rise there, and we'll get more of an interesting profile. So we'll start off with a sine again. And then we'll lay in something a little bit more interesting. We can do key tracking on both. So depending on what key you play, depends on the filtering. And then I'm throwing on some interesting sort of sound effects on these. So this is the Owl on Vinyl. If you go to the source sounds folder, there's loads of sounds like this. So what we can do here is make it change depending on what note you play and make it play randomly. And then we'll go and throw on a bit of reverb and distortion again. Just keep it simple. Make sure it's not too muddy. And this is what I've got so far. So you're just trying to get a nice warm background texture, and then you're trying to layer in some interesting sounds. I've made loads of sounds like this that you can drag and drop in to your own sort of sound design. And then you can start to add some randomness. So you can add randomness to things like, again, the 3D profile of the granular upgrade, for example. You can add randomness to the pitch. You can also add randomness to, for example, the unison. Make sure they're not too extreme, otherwise you will start getting a real chaotic sound. And you can even layer in an additional texture. So we're already getting quite an interesting sound, mostly because you're adding some variation and you've got the interesting sample. So the sample's playing random sections, so it's going to be different each time. So So using that, I tweaked loads of different sounds and made different pad textures, which are in this track and I'll demo now. So here are the pads. Now for this, all I'm doing is, again, just playing some of the notes from the triads, as well as some additional 7th and 9th notes. And I'm just layering loads of different pads together. So mostly just layering them as is. So you've got Dark Pads of Doom from the pack, which sounds like this. Layer that with Dark Starter Pad. Again, not much effects going on, just using the sounds from the pack. A little bit of EQ in here and there if you want to change the profile. Some of them pan left, some of them pan right, giving it a bit of space. So we got a few more from the pack, Stormy Pads and Organic Warmth. And then we're also grouping some vocal effects. There's loads of great VSTs I've talked about in the past for vocal effects, such as the Ear Elzar Glotman pack. Leco's got some nice vocal stuff. The Oliver Patrice Pool project has got some great vocal stuff. And I've recently found another one from East West Instruments, which is great too. But yeah, here we're just using some of the vocal pads from the pack. Fox Pad 1, again, panning some left, some right, and giving it more sort of a space feel. So it's Fox Pad 1, 2, and 3 from the pack layered on top of each other. All together, we've then got this. So you then want to cut through the mix with the lead. So on the lead, we've just got a bit of soothe, taming some of the resonance again. And we've got the main lead here, which sounds like this. A little bit of filtering, a little bit of reverb, and I'm using the tape lead patch. So it's these sort of square and saw wave with some white noise and just getting the profile right, so it's more of an interesting lead. And we've got some variance on the pitch just to give it a more sort of lo-fi feel. And I've got a similar texture here, which is playing a different melody, a little bit more subtle in the background. Again, we're sending a lot of this to the send, so you get some shimmer from these as well. Tape lead there, and we're mixing that with the duduk lead, which is just a note from my duduk, blended with some synth. So that's it for the lead. And then bass, we're keeping it super simple in this genre. For the bass, I've used essentially a slight pluck, and then it simmers down a little bit. You don't want it to be just flat bass on off sub. I find that's a little bit too jarring. So I like to keep it a little bit more sort of plucky, but you still want that steady sort of aggressive bass that sticks around throughout the note, which is here. So for this, keeping it simple with a sine wave, pitched it right down just so you know how to go as low on the keyboard. Blended that with a sort of granular texture, which gives it a little bit more grit and wobble. And then making sure to filter it heavily, add a lot of distortion, and you got your bass. I've also got a reverse sort of swell here as well. And then finally, I've added a few vocals with some heavy distortion with the Decapitator from Sound Toys, quite aggressively driving it. And these cut through nicely. These are also in the pack as well. So we put it all together. Initially, I'm filtering out some of the lows. I've actually got it going through a cab emulator, and it sort of fades away, bringing in more of the warmth of the track, just to slowly blend the intro in. And I've got my usual mastering rack. If you want to know what's on the mastering rack, do check out this video where I talk about it in more detail. It's essentially the same, but I can definitely do more of an in-depth tutorial again if people are interested. But yeah, storm through that a little bit. If there's any questions that you've got, please do let me know in the comments down below, and I can answer them with a video or a comment depending on how in detail it is. I'm going to be doing more short form content as well, so if you've got any questions, I can do short videos as well, give you a tag. So do let me know in the comments down below if you've got any questions, reproduction. So thanks for watching, and catch you next time.